well, it looks as if it's going well in both Blackpools.
Yes.
And of course we had a very good record here in Blackpool South in the last by-election. So obviously it's very fertile ground.
Yes.
And you must both be very hopeful.
Yes, I mean, I've been, Mark's been here, for the by-election. I've come for the general, and I've been really surprised at how much support there is for reform on the doors, at events, and also on social media. It's been overwhelming, the kind of response we've got there.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are understanding that if they want change, they've got to vote for it.
Yes.
That you don't get change by wanting it, but voting in the same old pattern. And I think a lot of people were quite scared to vote reform because they thought, well, if they vote reform haven't got much of a chance. But now that we have, in more than one poll now, big respectable polls, overtaken the Tories, I think people see that there is a point in voting reform.
Definitely, and I sense people, who voted Conservative here, particularly in what was Blackpool North was Conservative until the boundary change. I sense they think, what do I do, because I've got no faith in the Conservative Party, I don't want to vote Labour, and yes, reform is the obvious choice, but it's just overcoming that kind of, is it a disloyalty or the fact that it's a change of voting behaviour, but I think we represent what was, the kind of Thatcherite conservatism that was what people probably associated with the Conservative Party and have been voting for years, even though that's not been the case for years.
And what we've got to remember with Mrs Thatcher was that the reason that she got such very large majorities was that ordinary working people supported her because they understood that it was through her policies that they were going to get on.
Yes.
And I think very much the same thing now applies to reform. We've got the tax cuts and all the rest of it. People are going to be able to get on if they vote reform. And I think that appeals right across all the economic groups. And so, I think we are the heirs to Thatcher, but I think also we're the heirs to Thatcher's appeal to the ordinary working chap as opposed to the privileged elite.
Yes.
She was never for that. She was always for the grafters.
No, I think you're right. I think we've seen the last 27 years is this kind of creeping growth of the state, invading every part of our life. And one of the things I think that Margaret Thatcher's success, and then John Major, had the kind of inherited a lot of that, was the fact that it allowed people to do things for themselves, create opportunities, have businesses, build a future for the children, and there was opportunity. And I know, I'm nearly 50. And I look at the opportunities I had in the 90s and early noughties when I was, finishing university and stepping out into the world of work. And you just took those for granted. I look at, I've got, grown-up kids now. The opportunities aren't there. And at some point I'll be a grandfather. And I just don't, I think it'd be even, I want to make sure that the opportunities are getting better, not worse. Yep. And I think that's what we're about, is that change. Just maybe a little short piece on the Tories, because and I remember my journey, just to sort of praise it for you, was joining. I've only been in politics just under 2 years, getting in there, voted Conservative, sorted with the party, and at the sort of local council level, the activists there were, Conservative.
Yeah.
They've gone, as they would. And as I got into stood for Parliament or got on the parliamentary list, met the rest of the CCHQ, the other candidates, and started to think, and the kind of party apparatchiks, that this wasn't, this is something else. And then I started looking at reforms policies and thinking, people had said, have you looked at what reform was saying? And I'd have a look, and I think, I quite like that, I quite like that. And then, as I got into this campaign for the Greater Manchester Mayor, and the pressure was on, the support wasn't there, and the party's policies, and it kind of forced me into a position where I thought, I'm either going to step down from this, because I'm trying to do a huge, high-profile, political contest here with no support, and it's humiliating. And or I'm going to switch to reform where I think my politics lie anyway, in truth. And it was one or the other. If reform hadn't have said yes, we want you on board, I would have stopped. It wouldn't have been a case. I wouldn't have just carried on for the sake of the party. It's I don't believe in that anyway. I think it's country first, constituency, parties.
Certainly country first. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I was a Conservative for 55 years, and I joined the Young Conservatives when I was 16. and I stood in two unwinnable seats, and then I represented Maidstone for 23 years. I was a government minister, I was in the shadow cabinet, I was shadow home secretary. So I mean, I've got a very, very long, deeply established relationship with the Conservative Party. So it was actually quite difficult to get out of it, but they have made such an unholy mess since 2019. You know, they come in with a majority of 80, and I thought, good, you know, we've got a Tory government for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, within 2 years I was thinking, no, we haven't. You know, we've got an omni-shambles, and that is what we have. And I have come to the conclusion, sadly, and I know that, you know, people who worked hard for the party when I was will be saddened by this, but I've come to the conclusion that it is in the interests of the Conservative Party that they're annihilated this time.
Yes. Do you see any future for them?
It depends entirely which phoenix rises from the ashes. You know, they're going to be very, very badly, unless a miracle for them happens, they're going to be very, very badly mauled in this election, and a lot will depend on what comes out of that. You know, and whether they decide to go down the same route that they've been going down, in which case, you know, I don't see any future, or they rethink and rediscover Conservative principles.
Yes. Yeah. We will see.
That is undeniable. We will.